There is no human work prior to modern times that contains statements which were equally in advance of the state of knowledge at the time they appeared and which might be compared to the Quran. There is perhaps no better illustrations of the close links between Islam and science than the Prophet's hadith, "Utlub al-ilma walau fi sin," seek after science even in China, which is a veritable invitation to man to enrich his knowledge. More significant, if it is possible, is the famous hadith, "Midadul ulama afdalu min dami shuhada." The scholar's ink is more precious than the martyr's blood. It comes as no surprise, therefore, to learn that religion and science have always been considered to be twin sisters by Islam, and that today, at a time when science has taken such great strides, they still continue to be associated, and furthermore, certain scientific data are used for the better understanding of the Quranic text. What is more, in a century where, for many, scientific truth has dealt a death blow to religious belief, it is precisely the discoveries of science that, in an objective examination of the Islamic revelation, have highlighted the supernatural character of certain aspects of the revelation. When all is said and done, generally speaking, scientific knowledge would seem, in spite of what people may say, to be highly conducive to reflection on the existence of God. Once we begin to ask ourselves, in an unbiased or unprejudiced way, about the metaphysical lessons to be derived from some of today's knowledge, for example, our knowledge of the infinitely small or the problem of life, we indeed discover many reasons for thinking along these lines. When we think about the remarkable organization presiding over the birth and maintenance of life, it surely becomes clear that the likelihood of it being the result of chance gets less and less as our knowledge and progress in this field expand. To me, it would seem that the scientific progress made in understanding the fantastic complexity of higher beings provides strong arguments in favor of the opposite theory. In other words, the existence of an extraordinarily methodical organization presiding over the remarkable arrangement of the phenomena of life. In many parts of the book, the Quran leads in simple terms to this kind of general reflection, but it also contains infinitely more precise data which are directly related to facts discovered by modern science. These are what exercise a magnetic attraction for today's scientists. For many centuries, man was unable to study them because he did not possess sufficient scientific means. It is only today that numerous verses of the Quran dealing with natural phenomena have become comprehensible. A reading of all the commentaries, however knowledgeable their authors may have been in their day, bears solemn witness to a total inability to grasp the meaning of such verses. I should even go so far as to say that in the 20th century, with its compartmentalization of ever-increasing knowledge, it is not always easy for the average scientist to understand everything he reads in the Quran on such subjects without having recourse to specialized research. This means that to understand all such verses of the Quran, one is today required to have an absolutely encyclopedic knowledge, by which I mean one which embraces very many disciplines. The Quran is a religious book which has no scientific purpose. Whenever man is invited to reflect upon the works of creation and numerous natural phenomena, the obvious intention is to stress divine omnipotence. In these reflections, we find allusions to data connected with firmly established scientific knowledge. These findings clearly appeared only in modern times. When one compares religious teachings with material data, one must carefully take account of the meaning of the words of the Quranic text. This is a suggestive example in a verse of the Suratul Araf about the creation. Inna rabbakumullahu alladhi ghalaka samawati wal arda fi sittati ayamin. The common translation is, your Lord is God who created the heavens and the earth in 6 days. Nevertheless, we know that the Arabic word ayam, the usual translation of which is days, appears in the Quran with the meaning of very long periods of time. Examples are given in my book, The Bible, the Quran and Science. No equivalence exists with the precise meaning of the word in the Bible, where the days of the week are considered, the seventh one being the Sabbath, when God is described in the Bible as having rested. The Quran does not mention it at all. The major notion to be derived from the Quran concerning the creation is a concomitance in the celestial and terrestrial evolutions, with the fundamental data about the existence of an initial unique gaseous mass whose elements, although at first fused together, subsequently became separated. These notions are expressed in the Surah Fussilat. Thumma istawa ila samai wa hiya duhanun. Then God turned to the heaven when it was a smoke, and in the Surah Al-Anbiya, أَوَلَمْ يَرَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا أَنَّ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضَ كَانَتَا رَتْقًا فَفَتَقْنَاهُمَا. Do not the unbelievers see that the heavens and earth were joined together, then we clothed them asunder. The separation process resulted in the formation of multiple words, a notion which crops up a dozen times in the Quran when it has formed the second verse in the Surah Al-Fatiha, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Praise be to God, the Lord of the world. All this is in perfect agreement with modern ideas on the existence of a primary nebula and the process of secondary separation of the elements that had formed the initial unique mass. This separation resulted in the formation of galaxies, and then, when these divided, of stars from which the planets were to be born. All that is in perfect agreement with modern notions concerning the history of the universe. Moreover, reference is made in the Quran to an intermediary creation between the heavens and the earth, as in Surah Al-Furqan, وَلَقَدْ غَلَقْنَا السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضَ وَمَا بَيْنَهُمَا. We have created the heaven, the earth, and what is between them. This intermediary creation corresponds to the modern discoveries of bridges of matter which have been demonstrated as present outside organized astronomical systems. Or can we imagine that a man, much more than 1,000 years ago, could have been the author of such reflections which proceed from a general concept of the universe when this concept was not formed until centuries after his death? In the Quran we find notions about the nature and the movement of celestial formations. For example, the sun and the moon, which were previously defined in the Bible as luminaries, are distinguished in the Quran by the use of different epithets: light, nur for the moon, torch, siraj for the sun. Presently we know that the first is an inert body which reflects light. The second is a celestial formation in a state of permanent combustion and a source of light and heat. The word star, najm, in the Quran is accompanied by another qualifying it which indicates that it burns and consumes itself as it pierces through the shadows of the night. It is the word thaqib. The word kawkab definitely seems to mean the planets, which are celestial formations that reflect and do not produce light like the sun. Today we know that the celestial organization is balanced by the position of the stars in defined orbits and the interplay of gravitational forces related to their mass and speed of movement, each with its own motion. Orbit and own motion are the foundation of this balance. They are precisely what the Quran describes in the Surah Al-Anbiya. وَهُوَ الَّذِي خَلَقَ اللَّيْلَ وَالنَّهَارَ وَالشَّمْسَ وَالْقَمَرَ كُلٌّ فِي فَلَكٍ يَسْبَحُونَ. God is the one who created the night, the day, the sun and the moon. Each one is traveling in an orbit with its own motion. This movement is expressed by the verb sabaha, yasbahun in the text. The primitive meaning of the word, I said, the primitive meaning of the word, carrying the idea of a motion which comes from any moving body, be it the movement of one leg as one runs or the action of swimming in water. The sequence of day and night is expressed in terms that today are highly significant from a scientific point of view by using the verb kawara, second form. So the Surah Al-Zumar describes the night, describes the way the night winds or coils itself about the day, just as in the original meaning of the verb, a turban is wound around the head, a totally valid comparison. The evolution of the heavens and the notion of a settled place for the sun are also mentioned. They are in agreement with well-established modern ideas. More than that, the Quran seems to have alluded to the expansion of the universe. There is also the conquest of space. This has been undertaken thanks to remarkable technological progress and has resulted in man's journey to the moon. And this surely springs to mind when we read the Surah Al-Rahman. يا معشر الجن والإنس إن استطعتم أن تنفذوا من أقطار السماوات والأرض فانفذوا لا تنفذون إلا بسلطان. O assembly of jinns and men, if you can penetrate regions of the heavens and the earth, then penetrate them, you will not penetrate them save with a power. This power comes from the Almighty, the subject of the whole surah being an invitation to recognize God's beneficence to man. Let us now return to the earth, and among many statements, let us quote verses concerning the mountains. Modern geology has taught us the phenomenon of folding which formed the mountain ranges. The stability of mountains is linked to this phenomenon, since the folds were to provide foundation for the reliefs that constituted the mountains. What do we find about them in the Surah Al-Naba? Alam najalil arda mihadan wal jibala autadan. Have we not made the earth an expanse and the mountain stakes? The stakes, autad in the Quran, which are put into the ground like those used to anchor a tent, are the deep foundations of geological folds. The same harmony with modern knowledge is noticed in the case of the numerous reflections in the Quran concerning the water cycle in nature. This is a topic which is very well known today, and the verses of the Quran referring to it seem to us to express ideas that are now totally self-evident. But if we consider the ideas prevalent at the time of the revelation, they appeared to be clearly marked more than myth and philosophical speculation than by facts such as those observed and studied nowadays. Similarly, on other topics as well, such ancient and wrong notions never appeared in the Quran. Let us consider, for example, this verse in the Surah Al-Zumar. ألم ترى أن الله أنزل من السماء ماء فسلكه ينبيع في الأرض ثم يخرج به زرعا مختلفا ألوانه. Hath thou not seen that God sent water down from the sky and led it through sources into the ground? Then he causes sown fields of different colors to grow. We must compare one of the aspects of the water cycle to which this verse alludes and other details about it given in the Quran with the ideas prevalent long ago. The first Korean description of the water cycle in nature dates back to the 16th century with Bernard Palissy. Prior to this, people talked about the theory whereby the waters of the oceans, under the effect of winds, were thrust to the interior of the continents. They then returned to the oceans via the great abyss, the Tartarus of Plato. In the 17th century, Descartes still believed in it, and even in the 19th century, there was talk of the theory according to which water was condensed in cool mountain caverns, forming underground lakes that fed springs. Today we know that the infiltration of rainwater is responsible for this. But more than anything else, I have been impressed at first by statements in the Quran dealing with living beings, the animal and vegetable kingdoms, especially with regard to the origin of life, the origin of man and reproduction. It is only since modern times that scientific progress has made the content of many such verses comprehensible to us. The ancient commentators presented them according to their apparent meaning, which was of the utmost importance, of course, since it evokes divine omnipotence. But they could not give a view of their real meaning. lacking essential scientific knowledge which is necessary to understand it. Even today, numerous translations and commentaries of the Quran made by men with only a literary background give a mistaken view of their real meaning. Only a scientist is able to give an explanation. The biological allusions in the Quran are highly significant. Such is the case of a verse of the Surah Al-Anbiya, a part of which has already been quoted. أولم يرى الذين كفروا أن السماوات والأرض كانتا عتقا ففتقناهما وجعلنا من الماء كل شيء حي أفلا يؤمنون. Do not the unbelievers see that the heavens and the earth were joined together and we clothed them asunder, and we got every living thing out of the water? Will they then not believe? This is an affirmation of the modern idea that the origin of life is aquatic. Progress in botany at the time of the Prophet was in no country advanced enough for it to be established as a rule that plants have both male and female parts. Nevertheless, we may read the following in the Surah Taha. وَأَنزَلَ مِنَ السَّمَاءِ مَاءً فَأَخْرَجْنَا بِهِ أَزْوَاجًا مِنْ نَبَاتٍ شَتَّى. God is the one who sent water down from the sky, and thereby we brought forth elements of couple of plants, each separate from the other. In the Surah Al-Ra'd, we read the following: وَمِن كُلِّ ثَمَرَاتِ جَعَلَ فِيهَا زَوْجَيْنِ إِثْنَيْنِ. Of all fruits, God placed on the earth two elements of a pair. زَوْجَيْنِ إِثْنَيْنِ. Verse 36 of the Surah Yasin clearly alludes to the existence of components of couples in plants as well as in the human beings whom the verse is referring to. سبحان الذي خلق الأزواج كلها مما تنبت الأرض ومن أنفسهم ومما لا يعلمون. Glory to him who created the components of couples of every kind, or what the ground causes to grow on themselves, that is to say human beings, and of what they do not know. In the field of physiology, there is a verse which appears to be extremely significant. But to understand it, we have to know that chemical reactions occur in the intestine, and that substances extracted from food inside pass into the bloodstream, and that the bloodstream transports them to all the organs of the body, among which are the milk-producing mammary glands. That is precisely what is said in this verse of the Surah Al-Nahl. وَإِنَّ لَكُمْ فِي الْأَنَامِ لَعِبْرَةً نُسْقِيكُم مِّمَّا فِي بُطُونِهِ مِن بَيْنِ فَرْثٍ وَدَمٍ لَبَنًا غَلِيظًا سَائِغًا لِلشَّارِبِينَ. Verily in cattle there is a lesson for you. We give you to drink what is inside their bodies, coming from a conjunction between the contents of the intestine and the blood, a milk pure and pleasant for those who drink it. The Quranic revelation considerably enriched man with data about himself, as we shall see, but its teachings have been clearly and completely understood only in modern times. As a medical doctor, particularly attracted to the natural sciences and physiology, I must confess that when I read the Quran in the original text for the first time, these data concerning man were those which impressed me the most. This is the reason why, as soon as I finished my first study, the Bible, the Quran, and science, I seized a favorable opportunity to deliver a lecture before the French Academy of Medicine with a special reference to human reproduction in the Quran. In order to carry out a valid comparison, one must remember that there existed a host of superstitions and myths about this topic in days of old and emphasized the absence of any reference in the Quran to the mistaken ideas prevalent at the time of the communication to man. Let us mention that several verses evoke the complexity of the male fertilizing liquid and the fact that an infinitely small quantity of this liquid, expressed by nutfah in the Quran, is required to ensure fertilization. This is also expressed by quintessence, if I may so translate the Arabic word sulala. The implantation of the egg in the female genital organ is perfectly described in several verses by the word alaq, as in the Surah Al-Alaq. Khalaqal insana min alaq. But my translation is the following one. God fashioned the man from something which clings. I do not think that there is any accurate translation of the word alaq, other than to use once more, its primitive meaning. To speak here of an adherence or a blood clot is a mistake. They are both derivative meanings quite out of place in this context. The evolution of the embryo inside the maternal uterus is a subject of reflection whose simple words correspond exactly to fundamental stages in its growth, as it appears in this verse of the Surah Al-Muminun. فَغَلَقْنَا لَلَكَةَ مُدْغَةً فَغَلَقْنَا الْمُدْغَةَ إِزَامًا فَكَسَرْنَا الْحِزَامَ لَحْمًا. We fashioned the thing which clings into a shewed lump of flesh, and we fashioned the shewed flesh into bones, and we clothed the bones with intact flesh. Thus, an initial aspect of the embryo is evoked, and thereafter the muscles covering the bones. We know that the embryo passes through a stage when some of its parts are out of proportion with what is later to become the individual. The Surah Al-Hajj seems to allude to this. فَإِنَّا خَلَقْنَاكُمْ مِنْ عَلَقَةٍ مِنْ مُدْغَةٍ مُخَلَّقَةٍ وَخَيْرٍ مُغَلَّقَةٍ. We fashioned you into something which clings, into a lump of flesh in proportion and out of proportion. In the Surah Al-Sajdah, there is a reference to the senses and the viscera. وَجَعَلَ لَكُمْ السَّمْعَ وَالْأَبْصَرَ وَالْأَفْئِدَةَ. God appointed for you the senses of hearing, sight, and the viscera. All these quotations are in harmony with what was to be discovered many centuries later. In view of the state of knowledge in Prophet Muhammad's day, it is inconceivable that many of the statements in the Quran which are connected with science could have been the work of a man. It is therefore perfectly legitimate not only to regard the Quran as the expression of a revelation, but also to award it a very special place on account of the guarantee of authenticity it provides and the presence in it of reflections which, when studied today, appear as a challenge to human explanation. Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you very much for your kind attention. Assalamu alaikum.